Thank you for joining us for CBN NewsWatch. I'm Efrem Graham. Ahead today, President Donald Trump and Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu talk about how to deal with Iran's nuclear program in a phone call, as the president again warns of possible military action against Iran. And the U.S. ambassador to Israel tells CBN News Trump means what he says, but Iran also threatening retaliation. The president sending the Marines and more National Guard troops to Los Angeles amid the protests over raids against illegal immigrants. And not far from Los Angeles, baptisms in the Pacific Ocean Sunday, part of a movement across the country called Baptize America. We're going to bring you the story from Newport Beach, California. And very few deaf people in America are part of a church. Now there's a unique ministry, church service specifically for the deaf. We're going to have that story for you from San Antonio. All those stories and more today on CBN NewsWatch.
This is CBN NewsWatch.
Tuesday, June 10th, going to begin this half hour in the Middle East as President Trump and Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu spoke about Iran again and the deadline for a nuclear deal approaching. All of that as Israel faces the possible crisis which could bring the government down. CBN News Middle East correspondent Julie Stahl brings us the story now. She's reporting from Jerusalem.
President Trump and Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu spoke on the phone Monday as U.S. talks with Iran over its nuclear weapons program continue, but with little progress.
We discussed a lot of things, and it went very well, very smooth. We'll see what happens.
Trump's 2-month deadline for Iran to agree to stop its program for developing nuclear weapons runs out this week.
They are good negotiators, but they're tough. Sometimes they can be too tough. That's the problem. So we're trying to make a deal so that there's no destruction and death. And we've told them that, and I've told them that, and I hope that's the way it works out, but it might not work out that way.
The Iranians claim their nuclear program is for civilian nuclear power. The International Atomic Energy Agency is now revealing that 20 years ago, Iran carried out implosion tests that are only needed in developing atomic bombs and have no civilian use. The Iranian regime is threatening retaliation if the IAEA censures its nuclear program or if Israel launches military strikes against Iran's nuclear sites. They also warned an Israeli strike on their nuclear facilities would spur them on to develop atomic bombs.
The Islamic Republic of Iran has prepared a series of steps and measures. The other side is more or less aware of our capabilities and capacities in this regard.
America's new ambassador to Israel, Mike Huckabee, told CBN News that Trump means what he says.
I don't know that we take Iran at its word. They normally don't keep theirs very well in the 46 years that they've ruled that country. But I would take President Trump very seriously when he says they will not have a nuclear weapon.
Israel is also facing trouble from within. Ultra-Orthodox parties of Netanyahu's ruling coalition are threatening to bring down the government. The issue is legislation that would force many ultra-Orthodox to serve in the military like the majority of young Israeli men. For decades, they've been exempt from military service by replacing it with religious study. Huckabee was pulled into the controversy when ultra-Orthodox parties asked to meet with him, sparking criticism from the opposition. He says both sides need to work out a plan, and it's not for the U.S. to intervene. However, a collapsed government would not look good.
It would create an extraordinary sense of anxiety because it will be viewed as instability.
In Gaza, some Palestinians continue to accuse Israeli troops of attacking Gazans seeking aid, but provide no evidence. Meanwhile, the new Israeli and American program to provide millions of meals to feed them continues.
Israel has delivered over 1,200 truckloads in the last 2 weeks.
Julie Stahl, CBN News, Jerusalem.
Our CBN News Middle East Bureau Chief Chris Mitchell is joining us now from Jerusalem. So, Chris, let's begin with Iran. They're threatening retaliation if the International Atomic Energy Agency censures the nuclear program or if Israel launches a strike against them. How could they strike back?
Well, they could strike back, and as Julie said in her report, they're actually warning they're going to develop a nuclear bomb if they attack those sites, which is kind of ironic. But right now they could respond with ballistic missiles, drones, UAVs, but also, Efrem, they failed twice last year. They had attacks. I was through both of them, and many people went to bomb shelters, but most, I would say almost 99% of all those projectiles failed. And right now, their proxies around Israel, it was called the Ring of Fire, are pretty much decimated. That would include Hamas, Hezbollah, and even the Houthis. And so right now, we seem to be at a tipping point, and the negotiations over Iran's nuclear program, concerns are heating up. As Julie said in her report, Netanyahu held a 40-minute phone call with President Trump. And also, President Trump met with his top foreign policy officials at Camp David. So right now, it seems to be at loggerheads. They're just undecided. The loggerheads mean that Iran is saying they insist they have to enrich uranium, and President Trump is saying they can't.
What will be the U.S. role if or when Israel strikes Iran? Do we know if Israel would act alone, or would the U.S. and possibly other countries get involved?
Well, we don't know for sure right now, Ephraim. I'm sure that was the subject of the phone call with President Trump and Prime Minister Netanyahu. So right now, Israel's best scenario would be a joint campaign that the U.S. could participate in. They have military hardware, bunker-busting bombs that would really make a big damage or large damage to Iran's nuclear facilities. If not, if they don't join the whole campaign, perhaps they can provide logistical support, intelligence, maybe air refueling. And to find out what nations in the area would help in the region, you'd have to look at the nations that helped Israel last year when Iran did attack. That would include Saudi Arabia, Jordan, and they were the ones that helped assist and knock down many of those projectiles and UAVs and drones that were fired by Iran. So there are limits to what Iran can do, it seems, even with their bluster.
What about this domestic political crisis in Israel? Is it a serious threat to the Netanyahu government?
It's a very serious threat, and Prime Minister Netanyahu is taking it very seriously. As Julie said in her report, the ultra-Orthodox are contemplating leaving the government because they don't want their young men in the IDF. They believe they're called to study. And on the other hand, much of the country resents that. So there's a pressure to make sure and try to get the ultra-Orthodox into the IDF. So it is a parliamentary government right now. So they need a coalition. Prime Minister Netanyahu needs at least 61 seats out of 120 seats to keep the government alive. So if one of these or perhaps two of these ultra-Orthodox parties leave, then the government will fall. They'll go to new elections, and that could be months. And it's a very dangerous time, many people believe, to have a caretaker government while you're looking at a possible nuclear Iran, while you're fighting a war in Gaza, the Houthis, and also Hezbollah. So it's a very, very critical time for this. Ambassador Huckabee, in our interview, told him he was not there to run the government, but he said it will be perceived in the U.S. that would create an extraordinary sense of anxiety, viewed as an instability, as he said. Now, he recommended to them, if you're having a hard time figuring this out, go to the Bible. There was a fellow there in the Bible. His name was King Solomon, and he took a very impossible situation, figured it out. So he suggested go to King Solomon about this and get his take as an example of what to do and how to go forward.
How successful has the new humanitarian aid program been, and what about the media coverage of it?
Well, it's 11 million meals and counting, Ephraim. It's been very, very successful. Had a huge impact on Hamas. It's undermining their control, their finances, and their funding. People are turning away from Hamas and turning actually even against Hamas. In terms of the media, and we asked Ambassador Huckabee about this because he had a scathing report on what the media did, because during one of these distributions at the very early days, they took Hamas's report that said dozens of these Gazans were killed by the IDF. They just took it at face value. He said it was recklessly and irresponsible. They had eyewitness accounts that contradicted that. So the New York Times, CNN, the AP, BBC, and Washington Post, they all had to walk back their stories. The way Huckabee put it, they shot the gun before they aimed it.
Speaking of Huckabee, what role does his faith play in his position as ambassador to Israel?
Well, he explained that to us in our interview. He said it grounds him. It says it gives him a special sense that this is a very special place on the earth, a place that transcends the geopolitical equation. And he said you cannot understand his role and you cannot understand this part of the world without recognizing that the Jews have a connection to this land that goes back 3,800 years, all the way back to Abraham.
Before we let you go, what else can we expect this evening on Jerusalem Dateline?
Well, we're going to have updates on the latest. We're also going to have a big part of that interview with Ambassador Huckabee. It was a wide-ranging interview. We talked about Iran. We talked about Gaza and the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation. And as we mentioned, we talked about his faith and his defining moment. He came back here in 1973. He went to the Garden Tomb, as many people have had, and he had a real sense of a calling on his life during that time. So it's a wonderful interview. I'm sure you're going to enjoy it.
Indeed. Looking forward to that. Our CBN News Middle East Bureau Chief Chris Mitchell, thank you again for your insights. Look forward to hearing from you again in the days ahead this week. I want to remind you at home that you can get the latest from Jerusalem Dateline by watching this evening at 8 Eastern on the CBN News channel. You can also watch it on the CBN News app, or you can find it on YouTube. Coming up, here at home, President Donald Trump sends 2,000 more National Guard troops and 700 Marines to Los Angeles amid the violent protest involving illegal immigration. We're going to have that story for you when we come back. You're watching CBN NewsWatch. President Donald Trump is sending Marines to Los Angeles amid protests against immigration raids, despite the objections of California's leaders. But polls show the public supports the president on illegal immigration. CBN's Wendy Griffith has our story.
President Trump is sending 700 Marines to Los Angeles amid the protests against immigration and customs enforcement. He's also doubling the number of National Guard troops already on the ground. The role of the Marines is to protect federal buildings.
The introduction of federal military personnel without direct coordination creates logistical challenges and risks confusion during critical incidents.
LA's police chief says most of the protests in the city have been peaceful, even though protesters have set fire to cars, blocked highways, and several police officers have been injured in clashes. One ABC reporter in LA said law enforcement shouldn't interfere with a bunch of people having fun watching cars burn.
It could turn very volatile if you move law enforcement in there in the wrong way and turn what is just a bunch of people having fun watching cars burn into a massive confrontation and altercation between officers and demonstrators.
LA Mayor Karen Bass claims the federal government's response is contributing to the chaos.
It makes me feel like our city is actually a test case for what happens when the federal government moves in and takes the authority away from the state or away from local government.
Now, demonstrations against ICE are spreading to other major cities nationwide, including Atlanta, Chicago, and New York. California Governor Gavin Newsom says Trump's deployment of the National Guard over his objections violates state sovereignty. The president and Newsom now in a war of words after Trump expressed support for arresting him.
What crime has Governor Newsom committed?
A crime has he committed?
Yeah, to warrant his arrest, as you
I think his
earlier.
primary crime is running for governor because he's done such a bad job.
Newsom challenging Trump on a podcast.
I told the president, just get it over with. Arrest me. Move on.
The conflict hasn't hurt Trump's approval record on immigration.
Yeah, you know, if we just take a look at the baseline numbers here, this is Trump's net approval rating on immigration. It's gone up like a rocket.
California has sued the Trump administration to block the deployment of National Guard troops and Marines, an issue that will likely end up at the Supreme Court. Wendy Griffith, CBN News.
Still ahead, protests have been raging in Los Angeles. People came together, though, not far away for baptisms in the Pacific Ocean. It was part of a nationwide movement. We're going to bring you a look at Baptize America. We've got the story for you coming up right after this. You're watching CBN NewsWatch. Welcome back to CBN NewsWatch. Not too far from those protests in Los Angeles, a crowd of people gathered at the Pacific Ocean to be baptized in part of a nationwide movement. Thousands of Christians across the United States celebrated Pentecost Sunday with water baptisms in an event called Baptize America. CBN's Paul Petit brings us the story now from Newport Beach, California.
There's something unique about these baptisms.
Just felt like God was there and just amazing.
And it's not just due to their location or commemoration of Pentecost Sunday. It's because scores of water baptisms are happening simultaneously nationwide.
The prayer of Jesus in John was that we would become one. And I think that that's what we're seeing right now is a unity around what we all agree on, which is water baptism.
It's called Baptize America. More than 27,000 people took the plunge, with more than 650 churches taking part.
We're seeing every single state is represented, hundreds of churches in some states.
This event grew out of Baptize California, which started 2 years ago with 4,000 baptisms. Last year, more than 6,000. This national synchronized event is being called the largest in history.
I really think that the coolest part about being out there is just experiencing people experiencing Jesus.
Gabriel surprised his mom by taking part today.
If it wasn't for her prayers and if it wasn't for God's grace, I'd either be dead or in jail, because that's the activities I was involved in the Middle East.
These brothers now share a special bond.
God was pulling on my heartstrings to, come out here and finally accept Jesus as my Savior. And today was the perfect opportunity.
And when it comes to baptisms, this beach has a lot of history. This is Pirates Cove. It's where Pastor Chuck Smith conducted his baptisms in the 1970s revival, as depicted in the movie Jesus Revolution.
This is the Jordan River of America to get baptized in.
For many here, they believe what's happening today is more than setting a record or fulfilling the Great Commission. It's churches and believers banding together in declaration to Christ.
It's just getting started. Our belief is that what happens at this beach will go to the ends of the earth.
In Newport Beach, California, Paul Petit, CBN News.
Coming up, the overwhelming majority of deaf people in the United States are not a part of a church, but now one church in San Antonio, Texas is launching a special service specifically for them. We're going to have the story for you when we come back. You're watching CBN NewsWatch. Nearly 96% of deaf people nationwide are not part of a church, but for the first time in San Antonio, Texas, that is changing. Community Bible Church is launching a service led by the deaf in American Sign Language, giving thousands a new way to worship in their heart language. CBN's Brody Carter has this report.
For most churchgoers, this is a typical sound from Sunday worship. For the deaf community, however, these moments of praise often remain silent and out of reach.
Third most unreached people group in the world is deaf people. 78,000 deaf people in San Antonio and no deaf church.
That reality struck a personal nerve with Texas pastor Ed Newton.
My mother was born deaf. My father was born deaf. I was an only child. My mom had cerebral palsy. She was told she'd never have kids. And so God gave my mom and dad me.
According to Deaf Missions, just 2% of the world's deaf population knows Christ, leaving 98% still in search of a divine relationship and eternal life. That's why Pastor Newton's Community Bible Church is launching a full deaf church experience.
So on Saturday nights at 5 o'clock, starting in June, Pastor Ashton's going to be preaching, teaching. Our deaf group will be worshiping. And for the first time in history, we now have a full-time deaf pastor on our staff.
I grew up, don't understand deaf culture. So when I went into this deaf church, everybody was signing. And then after I left, I started weeping because this is my heart language.
Pastor Ashton Luff lost his hearing at age 3. After years of struggling in hearing environments, a turning point came at a Christian camp for the deaf, where he directly encountered the gospel thanks to sign language with no interpreter needed.
In Romans chapter 8, verse 28, is that everything happens for his good purpose. And the purpose he gave me is a voice. And the purpose he gave me is my hands. And God said, go use it. And I did.
Now, the very hands that once felt left out are helping others find their place and be seen in the church.
So I would encourage every lead pastor, ask the question, how many deaf people live in your town? And I think you'll be surprised. Deaf people, like my mom and dad, will walk into your church.
From feeling forgotten to being called, these San Antonio faith leaders believe God speaks every language, even the silent ones of the heart.
So God,
Brody Carter, CBN News.
Time now for your Tuesday Tweetable, and today I want to leave you with this thought to post, tag, tweet, and share with those in your circles of influence. Be full of faith and watch God be faithful. Your unshakable faith moves an almighty God. Think on that and take God at His word. He is faithful, so you can be full of faith. That will do it for this edition of CBN NewsWatch. You can always find more of our news programs on the CBN News channel. You can find them there at any time, as well as online. That is cbnnews.com. Take a moment, let us know what you think about the stories you've seen here today. You can email us, newswatch@cbn.com. You can also reach out and touch us on Facebook, Instagram, and X. We'll see you back here tomorrow.